Warhammer 40k is arguably the pinnacle of nerdy hobbies, and I mean that in the best way possible. Very few hobbies require the dedication and passion that Warhammer does, and I would say that very few offer the same level of satisfaction as well. To me, finishing a unit and putting it up on the shelf with the rest of the army is one of the best feelings in hobbying. That being said, Warhammer is also filled with lots of frustration, disappointment, and confusion, especially for somebody who's getting into the game for the first time. And considering it's the kind of game that you can put 100 hours into and still get tabled on turn 2, you can see why it's so frustrating. In this video, I want to share my 3 biggest complaints with Warhammer 40k and share a little bit about how I think they can get fixed. Number 1, cost. It's not a secret that Warhammer 40k is expensive. That's probably everybody's first complaint when getting into the game. What really bothers me is the lack of excuses for this high cost. A simple Google search will tell you that Games Workshop operates at around a 40% operating profit, which is extremely high, even for a large company. Now, I'm not saying they can't make money. They're a business, they're entitled to that. I would, however, expect such a company with a large profit like that to want to expand, perhaps build a factory in one of their largest markets, North America. But that's not something that Games Workshop seems interested in doing. Now, I do believe Games Workshop has a warehouse somewhere in Tennessee, but I think it's only for distribution. All the costs of shipping are still getting passed on to the consumers. Really disappointing that Games Workshop runs at this high profit while also letting things sell out in their shop in mere minutes. To me, it's kind of clear that even while Games Workshop is making a lot of money, they have no interest in growing and making it easier for their customers to get their products. I think if Games Workshop did expand, they'd still be able to operate at a very high profit rate and potentially lower their overall cost of operation. Fingers crossed these savings would go on to the customers. Most likely, this will never change. Either way, I'm tired of paying $60 for a couple ounces of plastic. I don't know about you. It's also not easy to be optimistic when Games Workshop just put out an article on their website about how they're going to be increasing prices by around 5%. And I don't even want to get started on the one-employee stores that they have. Those are a really different story. Another glaring issue that seems to always nag at me is the overcomplication of rules in Warhammer 40k. It's not even just the complication, it's the constant change that you have to always be following up on. There are times where I won't play for a few months, I go to play a game, and something that has been normal for me the entire time is entirely different. We're currently in the 10th edition of the game, and I only started playing towards the end of 8th, so I actually haven't seen that many changes as some other people, but I've still seen a lot. Changing the rule set every 3 to 4 years is just a bit of an annoyance, but it could be manageable. Really, to me the issue is how GW handles the changes. Not only do the rules change at the start of the edition, but they're constantly changing throughout the edition as well, through balanced data slates or community notes, meaning that really expensive and fancy $60 book they sold you at the beginning of the edition becomes a little bit useless around the end of it. I do understand that the changes are usually positive, and I'm not saying it's the changes that are a bad thing. I'm just saying maybe the rules shouldn't cost so much if we're going to be changing them so often. The same goes for the faction rules as well. As indexes get tossed away and codexes come, rules are changing a lot. Oftentimes it's for the better, but when you gotta pay $60 for what used to be free, it hurts. I'm sure for some veterans it's really not a big deal, but for me personally, when I'm trying to teach some friends of mine how to play the game, it's always a bit of a hurdle when I have to tell them that that really expensive book they got is actually lying to them. Having a fancy book that contradicts the actual rules of the game is a bit of a problem for me. That's why I think the core rules should always be free from the start, and that way they can just update them online when people need to actually look at the rules. This is something that they've tackled a little bit in 10th edition, as you can get the Warhammer 40k app, and it has most of the basic rules in there for you for free. The faction rules will probably never be free, but what are you gonna do? They gotta make their money somehow. Not only do the rules change too much, but they are a little overcomplicated, I must admit. There's a lot of over-the-top terrain rules that my friends and I just totally ignore. We pretty much only ever use light cover and obscuring. And a lot of the time we have to stop our game because stratagem interaction feels a little bit weird, and we have to get on our phones and start Googling something because we don't want to feel like we're stepping on each other's toes. It's just something that I feel like GW could get better at, is answering those very specific questions with how rules interact. It doesn't seem like they do that very often. My final gripe with Warhammer 40k is a bit of a small one, but I wanted to admit it anyways. The issue is the pace at which new content comes out. Every couple of months or so, a faction gets its new codex, meaning its new rules, it gets some expensive dice, and maybe a model or two. This pace feels extremely slow to me, especially comparing other collectible games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I know are card games and they don't make models, but still, it seems really slow. Especially when you consider that not every release is for every person. I would say the average person collects 1, 2, maybe 3 armies. That means they're waiting 2 to 3 years for anything new, period. Personally, I have an AdMech army. 9th edition, we got 1 model. 10th edition, we got 2 models. In the past 4 or 5 years, I've gotten 2 new things to play with. And it just kind of feels bad. Now, I know the reason behind this is that Games Workshop makes a lot of different games, but Warhammer 40k is by far their most popular, and I would think they put a little bit more attention into giving each faction a little bit more. Not every game is for everybody. I think Age of Sigmar is awesome, but I haven't gotten into it. I think Blood Bowl is super cool, but I can't find anybody to play with. I know this is definitely a smaller issue, but I think it's still something that keeps people from getting into the hobby for too long. It's just difficult to get excited about 40k sometimes when you know that you have nothing new coming for you to get excited about for 3 more years. Well, those are my 3 main issues with 40k at the moment. I hope it's not too controversial. If you agree or disagree, please let me know down in the comments below. I still love Warhammer for what it is. I just see some opportunities that GW could take and hasn't taken to improve on the game. Let me know what your issues with the game are, or if you think I'm wrong and these are not issues at all. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care.